It is 10:32. First of all, just welcome, everyone. I'd like to go over a couple of things. The restrooms are out through the hallway there. We have prepared for us a handy envelope to put your $10 in, and we can come around and collect it before lunch. We also have a travel expense for attendance to the meeting, and these you just have to estimate what the costs are. They're just trying to keep track of how much this is costing to hold these meetings, so an estimate is fine. We have 6 new members here. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us your position, that would be great. I guess maybe start with Paul. Paul not here?
Yeah. So Paul.
Okay, yeah, and the microphone just push to turn it on.
Hi there, I'm Paul Bernazzani. I'm the Interim Associate Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences at Lamar University. So Lamar University is in East Texas. I'm also a professor of chemistry.
Thank you. Brent?
Hi, I'm Brent Caldwell. I'm the director of the Division of Fine Arts at Temple College. I'm also the band director at Temple College, and I teach other music courses. In addition, we have a 4-year program agreement with Texas A&M Central Texas, and I teach adjunct courses there.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I'm Beth Earhart. I'm the Department Chair of Anthropology at Texas State University.
Thank you. Mark?
Good morning. I'm Mark Hartlaub. I'm the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi.
Rahim Malik?
Rahim Malik Howard. I am the chair of sociology, also a professor at El Centro College in Dallas, Texas.
Thank you. Ashley?
Hi, Ashley Ferguson, Assistant VP for Strategic Initiatives at UT Arlington, and biology is my home department.
All right, thank you. A couple other reminders. Hopefully everybody's phone is not going to make any random noises. And again, using the mic, make sure that it sounds like it's picking it up. They're kind of sensitive. And mute it between when you're talking. So going on to the next agenda item, we need to elect a committee co-chair from a 2-year institution. And I'd like to see if anyone would be interested in co-chairing from a 2-year college. All right, great. I guess, do you want to, I guess we need to call a vote. I can't read your name from.
I might ask for anybody else.
Okay, Brent?
It's Brent Caldwell.
Okay, is there anyone else interested in co-chairing?
I'm interested to serve as co-chair.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I guess, what?
Okay.
Okay, we'll do a show of hands and let Rebecca count.
Or if you wanted to give them an opportunity to talk about their experience.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea. Why don't you each give a minute or two statement on your experience working on this committee?
And how much longer you'll be on the committee, that kind of thing.
Start. I'm just starting on this committee, so there's a caveat there. I will be on the committee for 3 years. I think I have some unique perspectives because we've just started a 4-year degree agreement a year ago, and I was very involved in that, working with Texas A&M system on developing that. I learned quite a bit about the higher level second 2 years of education and how to develop a clear pathway from one school to the next. And my other experience is I taught in public education for 23 years at every level from third grade through seniors in high school. So that's kind of I have an overall good look at it. And on top of that, my wife was a biology teacher for 28 years. So kind of know the whole education thing from one end to the other.
Good morning, everyone. I've been on the committee, this is my second year, I believe, and so I've been quite involved in terms of other activities happening here at the coordinating board. I have over 30 years of experience in working in a community college, and I've been in various positions throughout that tenure. Currently, I am the interim Vice Chancellor of Instructional Services, Chief Academic Officer for Houston Community College. I have experience in terms of the fact that we now have what we call a 2+2 program within our institution. We actually have a partnership in engineering with UT Tyler, who teaches the upper division courses within our institution. We also are establishing some other similar partnerships with other institutions. Right now, we just approved one with Stephen F. Austin, which is offering now the final 2 years for our interior design program, also being offered via distant ed and also on campus. So I have experience in terms of working with four-year institutions as well as working with community colleges. So I'd welcome the opportunity to serve as your co-chair. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions or remarks? Okay, I guess I can call the vote. I guess it will, the whole aye and nay thing just, I don't think will work. You have to, raise our hand. If you are in favor of Brent being co-chair, please raise your hand. Okay, Norma? All right, Norma, thank you. And Brent, that will be remembered that you're interested. That might be true. Yep, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the consideration of minutes from the May 3rd, 2017 meeting. Would anyone make a motion to consider the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, let me give you a couple of minutes to look them over. I know that they were sent in advance, but not everyone does their homework. That's good. Yeah. Great time.
So please have your envelopes ready.
Can you get me change? Okay.
Any amendments to the minutes? And the minutes are approved as posted. The Senate doesn't vote. Oh, well, so let's take a vote on the minutes, I guess, since there was a motion, sorry. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, minutes are passed, I guess. My home institution does the minutes a little differently. The next item is discussion of the Learning Outcomes Project, and so I'll turn the mic over to Rebecca.
Okay. This year, this is started in 2010 doing this with Lumina and the tuning project for engineering. So this has gone on for several years. And this year, the courses, part of the project are the Mexican-American Field of Study courses that did not have learning outcomes prior to this. And they were in 3 disciplines: English, government, and history. And usually we do more courses than this. We only did 4. But this year, because of the legislative session, our timeline for getting all this work done was kind of condensed. Just to give you an update of where we are on learning outcomes, the majority of courses in the ACGM have learning outcomes. It's been a long time coming, but the majority have learning outcome, and that's 336 courses. There are 225 without, and but they're in big chunks. Those without learning outcomes are the languages other than Spanish. Now, Spanish was one of the earlier ones done, but the other languages are not done. And how we approach that is going to be a matter of discussion within the agency. Because some of the languages, there won't be institutions offering degrees necessarily in Greek or Arabic. So how do we approach those different, because there may be very different kinds of learning outcomes. But so 225 are those language courses that would be the freshman and sophomore level language courses. Then the registered nursing courses that have somewhat baffled us here when we do our yearly review because no one offers them. There's 46 of those. The issue with the registered nursing courses were that they were in the nursing field of study and they were crosswalked with the WECM courses. So community colleges were offering and reporting them as WECM as opposed to the academic. So they didn't show up on our reports. They're still fine. Now they're not part of the nursing field of study because the approach with the field of study is that it is a transfer degree to prepare nurses who are going to a university to get their BSN. It's not one of those stair-step programs where you get your associate's degree and your RN at the community college and then you just go to the university. It's specifically for transferring those prerequisites for a nursing program. So we can look at those, in the spring. Think about what we want to do there for the nursing because they're not being reported. So when we look at our charts, there's no enrollments. Another group of those courses without learning outcomes, there are 52 science courses, but they're non-science major courses. So you have astronomy, you have meteorology, you have non-major chemistry and non-major geology or something, earth sciences, physical sciences that are for non-science majors. So there's a big group of those that would be used in a liberal arts degree, but for someone who is not going to be a science major, how do we approach that group? So that's another big group. Then within the particular disciplines, when we break those down, that we've already visited once, and when we did the first round of learning outcomes, we looked at enrollments and we did the ones that were transferred most frequently. And so these disciplines have already been through the process, but we just couldn't do all of their courses, so we'll have to revisit these disciplines. Art has 16 courses in the ACGM without learning outcomes. Communications that has 13 courses without learning outcomes. Even though they've already gone through the process for the discipline, it was only those courses that had high enrollments. Criminal justice has 5, drama has 5, English has 2, history has 1, mathematics has 2, physical education 4, psych 4, sociology 2, and speech 4. Then there are 2 disciplines which have never been considered for the Learning Outcomes Project. One was engineering technology. The enrollments are not there. They're not being offered, these courses are not frequently offered at all at either community colleges or universities. And I believe there's going to be a field of study for engineering technology. So we might get some feedback from that group and how to approach this. I think there's about 4 or 5 within that discipline in the ACGM that just do not have enrollments right now. And the other area is social work. And there are 2 social work courses that do have, being offered, but there's only 2. And so we'll probably be looking at that discipline as well as a field of study going forward for them that may give us information. So that's when you think of where we were in 2014, and we had over 1,000 courses in the ACGM, and most of them did not have learning outcomes. We made a lot of progress in what we've done. So that's where we are in the Learning Outcomes Project. This is very faculty-driven. When we do these projects, we solicit nominations, and I encourage you to either have your institution nominate you if your discipline is up, or if you have colleagues that are interested in this work. These committees are usually around 12 individuals, 6 from universities and 6 from community college. They don't just represent themselves, they have to be knowledgeable of what's going on in the state, and they are given homework assignments, and we do a review of syllabi. They are assigned syllabi at other institutions to look at and bring together ideas to discuss when we have the face-to-face meetings. So they have already, before they even get here for the meeting, those discipline experts, they have that knowledge of the subject matter, but they also have a view of what's happening at other institutions when we have those nominated. Usually we can get the work done with an all-day meeting. I have had meetings that were 8 hours. That's a long meeting to be locked in a room, but we just chugged that work out. But that's better than coming back. Sometimes if we can't resolve everything in one meeting, they will have a second meeting. So, like I said, encourage your colleagues and your institutions to participate in this because it is important work. So we bring those groups together through the summer, and then they compose the learning outcomes, they revise the descriptions. When they've done their work, we put that forward for public comment, and we notify all the institutions through their chief academic officers to let their faculty review this information, and then they also have an opportunity to give feedback to the learning outcomes group. So they'll get comments. We have a 30-day period for that to go on. And then these comments are taken back to the work group, and if they think someone makes a comment that improves the work they've done, we incorporate that and make more changes. If it's a comment, some of these comments are not actionable, and they say, good job. That's what we want to hear. But some are not where you can just, change a word or add a topic, so they're not actionable. And then others, the work group themselves say, no, this isn't really an improvement to what we've done. So they do get that feedback from the public. And then we make our final changes, and then it's brought to you. And that's where we are today. This is the work that's progressed through the summer. And there's several people on the committee, or at least a couple, there may be more, that have Genevieve has participated and was very helpful, and then could represent the group that did the dance group. And they had a lot of work to do. And it was, you know, but that was one of the most congenial groups, I must say. And then Janice was on with the math group. And so that gives you a good perspective of how this interacts together. So participation on those work groups is a good thing too. That's where we are today. It's in your hands now.
Thank you. That brings us to item 5, and we'll do each one, which would mean each one needs a motion. And then let me remind you that once it's being discussed, you can offer amendments. If reading the comments or what you see in the packet, you want to amend something, we can do that, and then we'll vote on the amendment, and then we can vote on the item as amended if you feel the need to amend something. So the first one is English 2351, Mexican American Literature. Is there a motion to approve?
I motion to amend and remove the prereq of 1302.
First of all, first of all, no, you could just amend,
You can
first make the motion to open the discussion, and then, move approval, and then I'll ask if there's, during the discussion, you can offer the amendment.
So let's do that.
Is there a second? All right, so we have English 2351 on the table. Is there any discussion?
The comments about the fact that 1302 is not required for any other literature is very sound. We have enough trouble getting this course to make as is right now. And so if our students, while we don't recommend that they take a lit without taking a comp, I don't understand why we would make it an outlier from every other literature unless we plan to review all of the other literatures and make a similar. And I don't know if that's the intention, which is a different conversation, but as of right now, this doesn't align with any of the other literatures, so.
If you read down on your notes, this was an issue of contention, and they worried about it, and our resolve was to bring it to your attention, because they weren't real sure which way they wanted to go. So
I would add that not only was it contentious, it was as contentious as it could be. It was a 3-4 split on the committee, so a bare majority.
What was their reasoning for making 1302 a prereq?
well, when it first came out, they did not have it on there. It was in response to a comment. And we did discuss it within the group, and there was that kind of mixed feeling. And so when it first went out for public comment, it did not have 1302. Then a comment was made, yeah, let's add it. And then when you have a yes-no vote, it gets real where you don't have feedback. That's why some are really concerned that it might hurt enrollments, discourage enrollments. So that they were real concerned, but at that point, we couldn't go back and revisit all the issues. So if we opened up one to revisit based on a comment, then we had to revisit, well, there might be others that were close. But this was the one, I think, that worried them the most, that, you know.
And I would add, I think there are sound pedagogical reasons to have this kind of concern, because, there are certain patterns that we establish throughout the ACGM for sake of consistency. You'll notice that many of the foreign language courses they're all constituted pretty much with the exact same parameters. The only thing that's different is the language itself. And in literature, we tackle a lot of content areas, but for the most part, your theoretical approach is going to be the same. So I would agree that my doctorate's in this area, and I think it's a little strange to have one content area in literature with a different prerequisite for all the others. And I too wonder exactly what was the reasoning behind this, because this wasn't originally part of the plan.
Well, I concur with Amber.
Okay, so I gather we had a motion to amend by removing English 1302 as the prerequisite. Did I ever get a second on that? Okay, very good. So any further discussion on the amendment to remove English 1302 as a prerequisite? All right, all in favor of removing English 1302 as a prerequisite to English 2351, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, so we have amended the English 2351 to remove English 1302 as a prerequisite. Is there any further discussion on the learning outcome project for English 2351? All right, well, let's then vote on accepting the learning outcomes project revisions of English 2351. All in favor, aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? All right, that means that English 2351 is approved as amended. Is there a motion to approve Government 2311?
So moved.
Second? All right, so we can now discuss the learning outcome project revisions of Government 2311, Mexican American Politics.
I have a question, hoping that maybe coordinating board could answer this. I'm looking at the second paragraph comments at the top of the page following the description, and I wonder if you might be able to explain the concern that the title change to include Latinx politics would not be consistent with the other disciplines revision. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Okay, this is in the Mexican American field of study, and all the other ones, the courses that were revised say Mexican American history, Mexican American politics, and Mexican American literature. Just stop there.
Okay.
This group, when they were developing the learning outcomes, they said it doesn't happen in a vacuum, you know, Mexican. So they thought it was important to include other Latino populations because, and also our review of syllabus indicated that that's how it's taught.
Right.
It's not that narrow. It's bigger. But they worried about if the title would have some negative impact. And I couldn't say one way or the other on that. I don't know. So it was also, there were comments that said you needed to call it this, and then there were other comments. The committee themselves thought, well, or the group themselves thought, if it's with those other courses, would that make it an outlier somehow? And I don't know.
Well, I jump in. While it may make it an outlier temporarily, I think that's the general trend that we're seeing in terminology across our institutions.
Any further discussions? All right, all in favor of accepting the learning outcome project revision of Government 2311, Mexican American and Latinx politics, please say aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Okay, Government 2311 is approved. Is there a motion to approve History 2327?
Take those at the same time.
The two history?
Yeah.
Yeah, so is there a motion to approve History 2327 and 2328? Second? Thank you. So we can open the discussion on History 2327 and 2328.
I will say that they had the fewest comments, and the majority of their comments were good job, or we really like them. So that was, they had general approval based on comments, and had the fewest comments, and then the comments were very positive.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of accepting the Learning Outcome Project revision of History 2327 and 2328, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Then History 2327 and 2328 are approved. The next item on the agenda is an update on new ACGM courses included in approved field of study criteria, which I'll turn over to Rebecca.
Okay. We're going to have an update on fields of study later, but they are active now, and one of their functions recently has been to add some courses. And the architecture group had met the year before as a learning outcomes group, and I think that was good practice for them, or they got in that mode of looking at discipline across universities and community colleges. And even at that point, we knew that there was not a sophomore level design class, and there is one offered at the universities. There is a sophomore design class. So how they're doing it in the ACGM, the freshman level are actually two courses, 2 3-hour courses that are offered, one semester, and another set of 6-hour, two 3-hour courses offered at the same time. And then the sophomore would be one 6-hour studio course offered the long, one semester, and then the second course in the second semester. So that's what they've designed here. And they, just like they had done previously in the learning outcomes, they aligned them with the accreditation standards for that discipline. And so those automatically go into the ACGM. This is just information for you to know that this is going on, this process is going on, and then also if your institutions are interested in offering those, these will be in the spring update of the ACGM. The other course that's been added was general chemistry for engineers. That was added by the engineering field of study group. This is, if you notice, it has quite a few learning outcomes. This too will go in the ACGM, and this is a single semester course just for specific majors. It's not for all of the engineering tracks, but for some of them, and they wanted to give the community colleges the options to offer this one chemistry course. So it will also go in the ACGM at the spring update. A little background on this one. It has been offered by one institution as a unique need course. That was Blinn College has offered this for several years as a unique need course, but they've had an articulation agreement and close relationship with A&M, so there was a definite path for the students with this course. There was collaboration between faculty in developing the course, but now other institutions can offer it. And there may be more institutions than A&M wanting a single chemistry course for engineers. So that's where we are with that one. It will be in the spring ACGM as well.
We're going to talk about field of study and where that's headed a little later in the agenda after lunch. But right now, I'd like to just sort of plant a seed for discussion in your minds, which is, first of all, how much do you use field of study curricula at your own institutions? How often do you teach the courses? How often do you advise students to use that field of study in preparation for transfer to a four-year institution for a bachelor's degree? And for you folks that are at the four-year institutions, at the universities, how often do you see students coming in with these courses, or how prevalent is this in the minds of your faculty and administrators that, oh, we're going to be getting students from community colleges with field of study curricula, and how are we going to apply that to degrees, and how is that affecting our transfer rates, and how is that affecting our completion rates for transfer students? I think these are all big questions that are worth talking about, so I'd invite you to consider that between now and this afternoon so that we can maybe have a little broader discussion, not just about what specifically are we doing in field of study, but how are we as a state approaching field of study, and what benefits is it giving to our students?
Any more questions for Rebecca or James? Okay, so we can move on to agenda item 7. And this is, as they said, this course is already going to be taught, and what they're asking for here is to allow this new chemistry course for engineers as an alternative prerequisite for the second semester of chemistry. Is there a motion to approve this as an alternative prerequisite? Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. So I'll open the discussion on having Chem 1109 as an alternative prerequisite for chemistry 1112.
Can I ask a question for the committee? For the campus that's currently using the Chemistry for Engineers course, does it satisfy the second semester of chemistry as the prerequisite?
That was the issue for us in putting it in as a prerequisite. And part of the idea was that you're packing so much into that course, but it doesn't cover exactly all of it. And so it was the engineering field of study that made this recommendation. I said, well, we need to hear from the chemist. And so if you look in your packet there, Dan Lindley, he was on the field of study committee, and he is a chemist, chemical engineer, but background in chemistry, master's in chemistry. So or maybe a PhD in chemistry. So he contacted the American Chemical Society and asked about using how they looked at those kind of things. If you're going into a chemistry field, they want you to have those two courses. And so what this is saying is that 1409, the new course, does not take the place of two courses. You still have to have that second chemistry course if you're going through that, going to a chemistry track. So if a student takes this course but changes major and wants to go chemistry, he's still going to have to take that 1412. And by using it as a prerequisite, it clarifies that it's not taking the place of the two courses. And that seems consistent with what the American Chemical Society is saying in their accreditation kind of standards. And they didn't want too much more added to that course either. They said this was enough. So, and I appreciate that Dr. Lindley did get this for us. And I didn't feel like that we could just do this automatically based on a recommendation from engineers. We had to hear from chemists too.
And I will say, you know, since this is basically A&M's fault, that a fair number of the engineers do have to take the second semester of chemistry. So, you know, allowing this to be a prerequisite, you know, the students, in fact, will have, if they're taking a standard one after this, already have learned a good deal of what's in the second semester, but not nearly, well, about a quarter of it is what they were estimating.
From what I know about the ABET accreditation, which is the accrediting body from engineering, only chemical and environmental engineering need the second semester.
Oh, biomedical does too. That was my son's major, and it was an asterisk.
Yeah.
That was.
Most of them are in chemical engineering, so I can put them all together. Sorry. The issue is one of transfer. Is, let's say a student is in some engineering degree and then wants to transfer into another department of chemistry. So should we accept the engineering course as a course that will transfer for essentially an equivalent? Yes, the answer is should be yes. And so because of that, because it transfers, therefore it should automatically be an adequate class for the second semester. So there should be no problem with this.
Very good. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of allowing chemistry 1109, 1309, 1409 as an alternative prerequisite for chemistry 1112, 1312, and 1412, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, there we now have an alternative prerequisite. It's still a little early for lunch, so perhaps we can move on to number 9 and get an update from John on the Texas Common Course Numbering Database.
Sure, be happy to give you guys an update of some things that we've done. We have continued to see improvements just in the use and in the appearance of the TCCNS from the group that manages the server at UT Austin. This year we put a couple of features on the administrative suites for people that are utilizing it as their institutional contact that allow them to copy all of their courses and upload them. It makes it an easier task to edit and roll over. We also went ahead this year because we had a lot of people that had missed the matrix release, and we had been contacted by students saying, hey, look, I can't find my school. That's an annual occurrence just because those institutional contacts, there's a high degree of turnover, so we're constantly doing a lot of maintenance and who needs to go in there and edit and have access. But this year, what we did for about half the schools when it was running a little bit late and schools started to, had already begun in the fall, is we copied manually everybody's matrix from last year to the current academic year and then sent them instructions on how they could edit. Instead of having to go build. And we had several schools become new members of TCCNS this year. Some of our private schools did. Baylor uploaded all their courses, which was kind of a nice move to see them want to allow students to look at the common numberings as far as what might transfer. We will probably roll out that as a practice and get some automation so that when we update the matrix as soon as the spring ACGM is released, that we will do a copy and have an easier way for people to edit. The enhancements that we're looking at as a committee to take under discussion are that when the website first rolled out, there was a lot of debate among the TCCNS board about whether or not we should include developmental education or not. And now that those DO 1s and 2s and 3s are included in the ACGM, and there is such a wide variety of nomenclature when it comes to schools as how they label and categorize their developmental sequences, that we think that it might be a good idea to not just commingle those in, but have a way to uniquely identify them as a color or something, so that people using that crosswalk at institutions can easily see, oh, this equals this. So even though we're not going to receive developmental transfer work, we would know the status that you come in as regarding to TSI, whether or not you go into Dev 1 or Dev 2 or you're college ready, if we're looking only at coursework off a credential. That is one thing we're doing. And then we're looking at, we have a code for institutions to identify courses that are part of their core curriculum. And we're wanting to find some reports and some data that would make it easier by institution to pull down just what is your core. I think that would be of a good use for advisors and counselors, transcript evaluators, registrars, and it would be some unique kind of analytic data just to see how uncommon the Common Core is across the state. So those are where we are. Do those seem like, I mean, we haven't had a chance to talk to big groups, but as institutions, the developmental additions and identifiers of core, are those things that you all would perceive as beneficial and useful?
John, do you think they would have the capacity to identify field of study as well? You know, you said core, but field of study is becoming so big, that may be something to think
In
about.
fact, I was writing notes down on that, and Rebecca, that's a great idea, and I will pass it on to Rebecca so that I think our next committee will talk about maybe, as well as core, we ought to have an FOS curriculum, because really the transferability that legislatively carries a lot more clout than even the core does. So, yeah.
John, one thing I would caution you about is just that when it comes to core curriculum, it can get a little complicated more easily than it can with field of study, because field of study tends to be pretty static until once every 5 or 10 years we revise it. But core curriculum is a constantly moving target. You know, this set of courses is in his core curriculum one year, and then the next year his curriculum committee revises it, and all those courses are back out again. So you literally have to say not just what's in the core, but which year was it in the core, and that can get difficult, which is one of the reasons that, you know, we have a core curriculum website set up here at the agency just to handle that big chunk of information of what's in the core, when did it come in the core, and when is it going to be out of the core. So it's just something to keep in mind.
All right, thanks, James.
Any more questions for John?
What were the privates that have joined this year? Or at least, I think there's been a lot of privates, but some of them chose not to put their courses on there. Where they're
Right, and I'll have to go look. In fact, Rebecca, I'll email you and you can dispense it, but Baylor was our test pilot for even developing that whole upload, because we helped them build their courses into just a database and then uploaded it. So they didn't have to go through adding course by course by course one at a time. And that made it pretty, easy for them to maintain, so.
One other question, John. When it comes to the developmental courses, do most institutions follow the convention of putting zeros at the front of the numbers to kind of indicate that it doesn't really carry transferable academic credit?
Yes. I mean, that's pretty uniform. The numbering sequences, how they identify those courses, all over the place. But I have yet to see a credential where somebody's developmental courses didn't lead with a 0.
Okay, that's good. At least there's some uniformity there.
All right, thank you. I guess we can, there's several things under agenda item 10, and I'll ask Rebecca to get us started on that.
Okay. There are several things we're going to have presenters for, but before we start that, I wanted to mention, I mentioned last year about the Texas General Academic Institutions increasing successful community college transfer. That's a report that's been put out for 8 years. in the last couple of years, it's gotten a lot of attention. The interest in transfer with the legislature has increased, and this report looks at a cohort of students who transfer. We look at transfer students from community colleges only, and they are at the junior status. So whenever they transfer and the institution declares them a junior, so we don't really look specifically into how many hours or anything, that the selection to go into the cohort. And then we compare that performance with the native students of a university. And this year we looked at the data, and remember, this is a small cohort because you're picking a cohort based on when they are declared juniors. And to be in the transfer part of that cohort, they have to have accumulated at least 60 hours, and they have only transferred once. This is their first transfer, and they come from a community college. That's what puts them in the cohort, and then the native students. And so it doesn't look at the whole spectrum of transfer, but what we found was that they may take as much as 5 years at a community college to get to that junior status. And this really isn't anything new. We've looked at transfer students, and we know that they go part-time. They drop out, they stop out. So they have some challenges there, but it was really interesting to see how different they were from the native students in getting just to junior status, that there was for this small cohort. So that was kind of intriguing this year to look at, well, maybe different points of transfer, we'll see different results. So we're probably going to expand this study to look at different points of transfer, maybe when they're declared a sophomore, which would be 30 hours of transferable work. But the same issues come up year after year. I've looked at this executive summary of all these, and we recommend the same things every year. It's sometimes hard to be creative in thinking of new ideas of what to do. And the things that we continuously recommend is that community colleges offer the field of study, and that universities accept the field of study, that you adopt, you have a consistent core and you participate in that wholeheartedly, and you do what you can to participate in those processes like ACGM and learning outcomes and field of study. Also, just outreach, the different kinds of recruiting techniques that general academic institutions do. And one of the most popular, and I don't know, we can't say that there's a causal relationship, but I think that it's viewed as being effective, is having university advisors and admission people on the campuses of the community college in a kind of a permanent situation, not just a one day a month kind of visit, recruiting visit, but where you have someone where the community college students can make that connection early with the university so that they know about the selection of their courses. So if this report also does a profile, and it shows the completion rate of the natives in that group and the transfer students. And on average, native students are going to have a completion rate in the 80 percentiles. 80% or more will graduate within 6 years. And that goes back 4 years after they transfer. That's what it looks at. 4 years after they graduate, 4 years after they transfer. And from their junior status, so 80%. And for transfer students, on average, that's around 67%. So there's, you know, is that 33%? Yeah, 13%, but that we're not reaching somehow, that we're not pushing them through the pipeline at the same rate. So that is on our website under reports. Also be aware that this report is in response to a rider in the appropriation bill, says that universities will put aside money for this report. And what we do is we do a survey and then we look at data and we put this report together. But the legislature also passed a Senate bill that's wanting to know the best practices for transfer. So that's another report that shows the interest, level of interest with the legislature. So be aware that there may be things coming your way in regard to that Senate bill too, that your institution will be asked probably for help with that study. But that is on our website and you can access it if you're interested in that.
So just a comment, or one comment for each of our two sectors here. So for you folks at the community colleges, very consistently the transfer report tells us that the #1 problem that your university partners see in receiving students from your institution is excess hours. The community college students are showing up with courses on their transcripts that don't apply to their bachelor's degree. That's the #1 most commonly cited issue. For you folks at the universities, once the community college students do successfully transfer to your institution, chances are they are going to not complete as quickly as your native students. And we don't know all the reasons behind that, but if you, again, when you're comparing those native university juniors to the community college transfer juniors, what you see is something interesting. The community college students, after they transfer, don't really attempt many more hours. In other words, the attempted SCH is about the same, but the time that it takes them to complete that bachelor's degree is significantly higher. Was it about how many semesters?
Well, actually, they do pretty close to the native students in our cohort. It's the difference in our cohort. Now, like I said, this is a very small piece of the population. Natives will complete in school 2.1 year, and on average, the transfers 2.5. So it is a little bit more. It's at the front end of the degree where they're spending a lot of time. What makes that change? Why do they become more focused? But you also realize that the completion rates are so different, that you have fewer transfer students graduating, so you don't get that graduation. When you look at the 2.1 and the 2.5, there's not a lot of difference, but those are your graduates. But not as many of your cohort group graduated for transfer students. So there's that whole group of those that didn't graduate that we want to look closer at. What are they doing once they transfer? They're still doing that dropout, stop out, accumulation, or whatever. We want to find out.
Yeah, I think that's especially relevant, right? Because these community college students, they're outliers in the fact that, unfortunately, relatively few of our community college students even transfer to universities. So you have to, I certainly imagine, okay, these students are motivated, they've worked hard, they've jumped through a bunch of hurdles, they've negotiated not one, but two higher education institutions and their systems and procedures and all that sort of stuff. So these students are motivated. They would seem to be low-hanging fruit in terms of, wow, these are some really motivated students that have worked hard, gotten through the system, and yet still, many of them are not graduating, even though they're in the same environment as these other students that are graduating at a higher rate. And what can we do to improve those students' chances? This is one of the ways I think these reports are really valuable. It's not that they give us all the answers, but they point out the problems. And this is an issue I think we ought to take more time as a higher education community to address.
We don't look at that, but, I mean, the report actually creates more questions than answers. And the issue of transfer is so huge, and the type of data analytics that need to be done, I mean, it may be that we need to break it down in parts and try to look at each one of those. There are, the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center does some of that work where they'll look at that socioeconomic, and they have signature reports, and I would recommend that if you are interested in looking at some of that, they have several reports. They had one last year, and they have a follow-up this year, signature work with the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center that will look at socioeconomic issues. Are you ready?
Alan?
This is Alan Mickey, and he is with the coordinating board, and he's recently taken on a position as coordinating the fields of study groups as they come forward. So he can kind of give you a rundown of where we are and where we're going. And we're going to get his presentation up on the screen, I hope.
Yes, hi. Excuse me. Hi, I'm Alan Mickey, as Rebecca said, with the coordinating board. I've recently been hired by the coordinating board to work exclusively on field of study curricula. I understand, I hear that that's already come up a number of times already in the meeting so far, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knows exactly what field of study is. It's a little complicated and very important to what's going on with our transfer initiatives here at the coordinating board. I'll be happy to work with anybody. You see my contact information there on the screen. If any of you or your colleagues have any questions or concerns about field of study as time goes by, please feel free to contact me anytime. How field of study helps our 60 by 30 strategic plan is important to understand. It's not just an isolated program. It's part of a broader package of solutions that the coordinating board is putting forward to try and help meet our 60 by 30 goals. As most of you know, the 60 by 30 broad goals are to have 60% of Texans aged 25 to 34 have a college degree by 2030, to have 550,000 students complete a degree or certificate in the year 2030, and to have all students graduate with identifiable marketable skills, and to have undergraduate student debt not exceed 60% of first-year wages by 2030. All of the coordinating board initiatives, including field of study, are designed to make important contributions to these goals. What field of study does is it provides the link between the ACGM and degree programs that are guaranteed to transfer. Because, of course, any course from the academic course guide manual taken at a 2-year institution will transfer, but not every course that transfers will necessarily apply towards a degree program. And as James Goldman just said a few minutes ago, our number one identified problem is that courses aren't applying to degree programs. By making it easier for students to transfer between institutions with a minimum of lost credits that slow down progress towards a degree, we're hoping that the field of study will contribute towards the 60 by 30 goals of having an educated population, students completing their degrees, and reducing undergraduate student debt. The field of study is, like I said, part of a portfolio of things. It's not a standalone initiative. These other initiatives that help influence transfer, or facilitate transfer, I should say, between institutions include required advising, a core curriculum that's guaranteed to transfer between all public institutions, the academic course guide manual, of course, and the common course numbering system. I'd like to add a quick word about how field of study differs from programs of study, because if you're coming from the outside, it's easy to get the two mixed up just because they have that one difference in word. Programs of study are about transitions from high school to community college to the workforce. They're about facilitating workforce education success, and they're under Perkins grants. Programs of study are created by advisory committees from secondary and post-secondary institutions, along with representatives from industry. And they help students and counselors with career planning by providing students with information about clear pathways towards obtaining an associate's degree. Now, this is in contrast, the workforce side of programs of study is in contrast to fields of study, which are academic as opposed to workforce. Here's what the Education Code says. If a student successfully completes a field of study curriculum developed by the board, that block of courses may be transferred to a general academic teaching institution and must be substituted for that institution's lower division requirements for the degree program for the field of study into which the student transfers. And the student shall receive full academic credit towards the degree program for the block of courses transferred. In other words, if a student completes all of the approved field of study lower division courses for, say, a mathematics major at one Texas public institution, that student has completed the lower division requirements for a mathematics major at all Texas public institutions. And here's how that works in practice. A little more of the details. If a student completes part of the FOS curriculum, then those courses must transfer, and if they don't complete the entire field of study, then the courses that they do complete transfer, and they'll have to finish the rest. If a student's enrolled in more than one institution, they follow the requirements where they're classified as degree seeking. Each institution must note the field of study courses on student transcripts so that when a student transfers from one institution to another, the receiving institution will know that they have to accept those courses. Each institution must review and evaluate its compliance, and the field of study curriculum committees, which is much like this committee, consists of 24 members drawn equally from 2-year and 4-year institutions. I'll talk more about the committees in just a minute. Here are the field of studies that we've already completed. We've completed Mexican American Studies, nursing, music, architecture, and 4 branches of engineering. Here are the ones that we are currently working on, where we have meetings already scheduled and upcoming. Business Administration and Management is first up in January, coming up in a few weeks. Then we're doing biology soon after, psychology, kinesiology and exercise science, and criminal justice. We're currently polling the members to see what their least inconvenient meeting date is, and we should have that date announced soon. After this next round, the ones that will be upcoming in the next coming months after the next board meeting will be finance, marketing, English language and literature, history, political science, and social work. Those nominations have recently just come in over the last week, actually. The final nominations came in. Those members have been selected, and they'll be going to the December cause meeting and January board meeting for approval. Here's how those committees work. We solicit nominations to the chief academic officers at all the 2-year and 4-year institutions and the Lamar institutions. The committees can have up to 24 members divided equally between 2- and 4-year institutions. Sometimes we don't get enough of the 4-year institutions to send in nominations, or there aren't 12 universities that have that major. And if that's the case, if there are only 8 universities, for example, that have that major, then we would have 8 representatives from universities and 8 representatives, and no more than 8 from the community colleges. We encourage your participation and contact with the committee members. If you or your colleagues feel very strongly about what the field of study should include or not include, the committee members will be posted on the coordinating board's website, and we welcome you to contact them or to contact me with your concerns, and I'll make sure that those get considered by the committee. Once things go to the board, there are several things that the board gets involved with in this, because the board takes this very, very seriously. The board authorizes the rules that form the committees. They authorize the membership of the committees, and then once we have a final field of study curriculum, then that's approved by the board as well. Now, after the board has approved a field of study, we publish those for a 30-day public comment period, which is an important time for you and your colleagues to review the field of study, take a look, and decide if you have any comments to make, and then those comments are brought back to the committee to see if any changes are warranted. Of course, the committee meetings are broadcast live on the web, just like this one is being. The meetings can last up to 2 days. We talk about this can go on for quite a while as we get into the nitty-gritty of what the committee thinks each undergraduate should know in order to be successful in their majors. We review the curricula from existing programs at 2-year and 4-year institutions. We, of course, look very carefully at all the courses in the ACGM because that's our menu of courses to choose from. We decide the relevant core curriculum courses, the total semester credit hours. We try to make sure that a field of study curriculum can be completed in addition to the complete core curriculum for an associate's degree. Where that's not always possible in cases like architecture, where there are just too many courses in a field of study to coexist along with the complete core, then a selection of core courses is done with recommendations for what other core courses would be necessary once the student transfers. Now, here's where it gets interesting with the ACGM, because these committees for field of study can recommend new courses for the ACGM. This has happened in the past, and Rebecca, I think, will be talking about this in a minute when your committee later considers some architecture courses that were recommended by the Architecture Field of Study Committee. So the Field of Study committees and the ACGM committees work in tandem and hopefully will work hand in hand. If the Field of Study Committee feels strongly that, for example, there's some course content that is really necessary to have in the lower division curriculum, but it's just not fitting neatly into the course descriptions and learning objectives of existing ACGM courses, then the field of study can recommend that some of the ACGM courses be customized, tailored, content pushed or pulled a little bit to consolidate perhaps some lower division courses. Or in hopefully what will be rare circumstances, they can recommend new courses entirely for the ACGM committee to consider. I'll give you an example of that. Here's an example of a pretty simple field of study curriculum, which is drawn very cleanly and neatly from existing ACGM courses. This is Mexican American Studies. You'll notice that all of the courses, except for the Spanish language course, are courses that have Mexican American Studies in the title. You know, the selection is kind of pre-made because of what is available in the ACGM. It's a nice short field of study. Students should be able to complete this one pretty easily along with the core curriculum and still graduate with an associate's degree under the maximum semester credit hours. A more complicated one, of course, would be something like engineering. This is civil engineering, which draws upon not just engineering courses, but draws upon mathematics courses, draws upon chemistry courses in order to make the field of study work. So this is one that took a little more debate from a committee to put it together of exactly what a undergraduate lower division curriculum needs to look like in order to succeed in the very challenging major of civil engineering once a student transfers to a university. Now, here's the architecture field of study. As the committee considered architecture here, they looked, of course, at some of the obvious ones like architecture history and architectural design. But as they debated the content of those design courses, they decided that some new courses needed to be developed to put forward to your committee, which I believe is on your agenda today, to consider Architectural Design 3 and Architectural Design 4. So the Field of Study Committee came up with the suggested content for those courses and the suggested learning objectives, which you're considered today. So sometimes this can happen. I don't think it will happen very often, but I'm hoping that, again, the ACGM committee and the Field of Study committees can be synchronized and have some of the same priorities as we move to try to make these field of studies doable and successful. So if you have any questions or comments, again, I'll be happy to take them now or speak with you privately as time goes by. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone on the committee have a question for Alan?
I do, Alan. First of all, thank you. I think this is really important work, and I think it's a wonderful step toward a reduction of credit loss and a better alignment between areas of study at our 2- and 4-year institutions. It occurs to me that I don't know whether completion of a field of study is indicated on a transcript the way core curriculum or core complete is indicated.
Well, it's required to be, field of study courses are required to be listed on transcripts.
And how are they identified as such?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't seen a student transcript in so long. Does anybody know how, is there a column on the transcript?
I've looked at a lot of transcripts in my career. Sometimes it's like an addendum.
Okay.
Where it's just listed at the bottom that these are field of study courses or these are core curriculum courses. Of course, core curriculum has that code, and that appears right by the course. I think this is an operational challenge for institutions to figure out how to communicate this information. I mean, it's not, we can make a decision here, but putting it into operation, you're going to get your enrollment management folks, you're going to get your data processing and programmers. It's not a snap way to implement this. So universities and community colleges need to, work with their software vendors to come up with some solutions to how to make it clarified on the transcripts. And then, even if it's on the transcript, the receiving institution has to have a way to pull it into their degree audit. So there's several challenges that these conversations need to be going on at the institutional level so that, that we're compliant, so that institutions are compliant.
Rebecca, if I may, I'm a registrar, and there's a group at TCC, it's called TCC Group, Texas Consortium, or John, help me out. Is it Texas Common Consortium or Texas?
The North Texas?
They have an agreement with our vendors, our software vendors, and they meet either once or twice a year. And they're the ones that get together and implement a solution, and then they basically give us a booklet with all the instructions, and this is the way you do it. And then we have to go ahead and do it. There's a group of people that do that. For the core, it took some years, a long time to get it done. So I don't know how many of these folks have been involved in the conversations, because this is not something that can happen overnight. There's already a precedent on core practices, and now I think this one is just a matter of adding, but there's a huge work that needs to be done on our end to code these classes that way. But I think the fact that we already have some best practices with the core, this is something that can possibly be implemented faster, I guess, than what the time that took with the core. But there's all these companies. We're a banner school, so Illusion will be the company that will get together in their meetings during, I guess, in the summer. I believe you guys are different. Your banner, okay. So there's a group of people that are doing this. I don't know, and this is the first time I hear about this, so I don't know how involved this group has been with this project.
Well, there is a compliance report that's required. Each institution is supposed to write a compliance report for field of study on the same timetable as their core curriculum evaluations. And if your institution is having particular issues or troubles, or successes for that matter, with this indication of field of study on the curriculum, that would be a place where you could mention that and keep the coordinating board updated about what sort of challenges or difficulties you have. And we'll see what we can do. If we notify, see some recurring problems, there might be something we can do to help with that.
Well, as I indicated, I have seen addendums, like they've just stapled a sheet to the back of a transcript that lists stuff. So that would be a short-term approach. But what Juan is talking about is this implementation of software changes, which the vendors take a while to develop that kind of information, but getting the discussion started at institutions. I mean, this is also a cost to institutions to do this kind of thing, and then the testing to make sure you've done it right. So there are some challenges here for institutions to be compliant in one way or the other. They might have to think outside the box.
Well, and to Alan and to Juan's point, it's not going to be an issue to get your courses coded and identified. The big thing is going to matter how it pulls from whatever your student information system is into state reports. Because if you can't report it out, I mean, you can be in compliance with the law and ease you're receiving and sending, credentials when it comes to evaluating, but you're still going to have to generate that stuff off a state report, and that's where those state reporting, groups have been, crucial. And I imagine, that we'll probably be reaching out to people on the co-board too to leverage and advocate with Lucian and other, big vendors to say that solution is not optional.
So the other set of software that we're using, the first word that I saw there is advising. There's a bunch of softwares. DegreeWorks is the one we use that is used for advising the people that deal with the students, advising and give them the schedule. I call them the schedulers, not the advisors. The people that work on their schedules. Those software also need to be coded, I guess, behind the scenes in order for this to work. It's a great idea, but I think it is something that we need to start bringing in our meetings with the admissions folks and the registrars folks and the advising community around the state. This is something that we need to start bringing up to their attention, because we don't want it to be 2030 for us to start working on this.
Exactly, and the field of study is only as useful as it is being applied and used. And it's going to be very important to make sure advisors and students know that the field of study is available for these subject areas. Because if a student wants to take Mexican American Studies, for example, well, they could just flail around and pick classes here and there and hope that most of them apply to a degree program. They may not know, or their advisor may not know, that the coordinating board has an approved field of study curriculum. So it's very important for all of you to do what you can to try to get your institutions to make sure that your advisors and students, particularly in these degree program fields, know about the field of study and know how much time and money it can save them if they stick to the plan, and because they'll be sure that all of those courses transfer and apply to the degree.
So, James, in my opinion, this kind of brings us back to the questions that you posed. And so from Tarrant County's perspective, we're beginning our journey for guided pathways. Our game plan is to adopt the field of studies as our guided pathways for those careers. And so we're behind the scenes looking at our infrastructure. I look at John at that point in time, looking at our infrastructure to make certain that we're accounting for these courses, but that's our game plan. And I'm sure I think I saw several of you at the Texas Success Initiative looking at these. We had lots of discussions at the Texas Success Initiative Institute about transfer schools accepting the fields of study and whether they were actually honoring that agreement.
At our institution, one of the things we're moving towards, of course, we're switching platforms and going to Lucian, but in our advising department, they're going to attach a particular advisor to each department, so that we can describe to them what our needs are as far as the field of study, and we can keep our learners on that field of study as we're going through. In the music department, in my division, we've had the advisors within the department. The professors are advising right now, so that we've been able to keep them on their pathway, but we're expanding that to the entire institution, and we just now got started on that, so it's a brand new initiative.
All right, thank you, Alan. I'd like to recognize John Wyatt. Give us an update on the interim legislative charges.
Good morning. My name is John Wyatt. I'm Director of External Relations here at the Coordinating Board. And my team and I work with the legislature on higher education policy and funding. So I'm going to provide sort of a brief update on where things stand. As you know, the legislature completed its regular session back in May. And they will not be in session again until January of 2019. So we're a little over a year out from their next session. But that year will go by pretty fast. So I believe you've been provided copies of the interim charges that were released. So each interim, the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker charge committees to look at specific issues. And they will hold hearings on these issues. And it's sort of an early indication of what topics can you expect the legislature to be talking about next session. And frankly, the topics are not that much of a surprise if you've been paying attention. One charge that is common to both the House and the Senate is dual credit. The House in particular has a very robust charge to look into pretty much all elements of dual credit: the funding, the rigor, the efficiency to degree, the transferability of dual credit. And I can tell you in the conversations that my team and I have had with legislative offices, dual credit comes up in every meeting. I think that this is a topic that the legislature really does want to take a deep dive on and figure out, how do we make sure dual credit is working, that it's helping students achieve degrees, that the funding is adequate and fair. So I do anticipate there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. Contributing to the discussion, hopefully, you may know the Coordinating Board has an ongoing study of dual credit that we do expect to have some results in either late spring or summer that hopefully we can share with the legislature and will help inform some of their conversation. A couple of other ones to note on here for the House. There's also a charge on how to implement innovative and non-traditional models of education delivery. So this was something that was of interest on the House side last time, was what are the barriers to innovation and how can the legislature really spur institutions to take new innovative approaches to help students academically. So sort of a fairly broad charge, but something that the legislature is going to want to take a close look at. On the Senate side, you'll notice that there is an item on improving transfer. This was a topic that the Senate discussed pretty extensively last session. You may recall that Senator West actually led a working group of the Senate Finance Committee to look at what do we need to do to make sure that transfer is effective for students. And there was some legislation that was considered. Ultimately, none of the legislation that came out of that work group was adopted. As noted, there was the bill requiring the study of transfer best practices, but really no substantive changes to how transfer works in Texas. So this is something that they're going to want to take a close look at during the interim, so that when they go into next session, they can have some proposals in hand that they can advance. There's also, on the Senate side, what are called monitoring charges. So usually there'll be several bills that the legislature passed in either the last session or a couple sessions ago that they'll want to see how is implementation of that legislation going. And a couple of bills that might be particularly of interest to y'all that they're going to want to monitor are SB 2118. This is the legislation to allow community colleges to offer baccalaureate degree programs. SB 802, again, that's the requirement for the study regarding best practices on transfer. and HB 2223. This was legislation passed this session that requires that developmental education be offered through co-requisite models, and it's a stair-step approach where in this academic year, 25% must be offered through co-requisite, subsequent year 50%, up to 75% in the third year. So what'll happen with all of these charges is the committees will schedule interim hearings. Those usually take place in the spring and summer of the year before session. Usually they'll wait until after the primary election in March to get going. We can expect that the commissioner and the staff here at the coordinating board will be called to provide data, to testify, to answer questions and provide analysis, which we're obviously happy to do. But certainly these are legislative hearings and they're open to everyone. So if there's input that you have that you feel is important to any of these charges, I would recommend through the appropriate channels at your institution, you provide that input to the chairman of the committees, to your representative, to make sure that your voices are being heard in these interim hearings. And then the other thing I'll note is that the coordinating board is in the process of developing its legislative recommendations for next session. We have a process here at the agency where staff develop preliminary ideas for what we might want to recommend to the legislature. Those ideas come from a lot of different sources. They come from advisory committees, such as this one. They come from reports that we've done. They come from our experience just working on these issues. And then those recommendations are considered by the senior staff at the coordinating board, by the commissioner, and ultimately our board will decide what are the specific recommendations that we want to make regarding higher education policy. And they're looking at things like how can we better achieve our goals of 60 by 30? How can we make the programs that we oversee and administer more effective? So we anticipate that in January, we'll have a conversation with our board about some draft recommendations that they might want to consider. And then hopefully at our April board meeting, they will actually formally adopt their recommendations for next session. So certainly though, now is a time where we're thinking about it and we're considering it internally. So if there are any input that you feel we should have, once we do have drafts, we're happy to come back to you and show you this is what we're thinking about. But we very much welcome your input because honestly, you're the ones in the field who have the best sense of whether what we're recommending will be effective or not. Again, once we have something maybe more concrete to actually discuss, we're happy to put that on the table and solicit your input.
Thank you. Any questions for John? All right, I guess we will adjourn for lunch. It's 12:03 and 45 minutes. Come back here about 12:50. So lunch is over there. Please help yourself.
And for you new folks, if you want sodas or anything like that, if you go out into the hall and go toward the front of the building, the last entry on your right is the employee break room, and there are soda machines and stuff in there. Or are there?
All right, I'd like to call us back in session. It's 12:50, and next, under Agenda Item 10, we have Reinhold here to talk about core curriculum.
Good afternoon. This is, my name is Reinhold Cornelius. I'm an assistant director in the same division as James and Rebecca, Academic Quality and Workforce, and I work with the core curriculum, so the Texas core curriculum. So this is a brief update what's going on there. I get the feeling most of you are probably very familiar with the core curriculum. If you're not and you have questions, there are my contacts in your handouts. Also, if there are people at your institutions who should know about the core curriculum, I'm always available. I know there are lots of people who are working on these things, not directly with the coordinating board, but they're nevertheless still involved with the core curriculum, like registrars and advisors and so on. So it's a big group of people which are involved. All the resources we have are on one page on our webpage, and that's our webpage /TX Core Curriculum. So if you go to that, there are all the links related to the TCC, as we call it. One thing was mentioned this morning, that is the Web Center. So that is the listing of all the core curriculum courses in the state, and it is done by institution and by the different areas of the core curriculum, and as James mentioned very importantly this morning, also by year. So every year there is a new list, and every institution has a chance every year to change the list of core courses, and more than half of them will do so. And that was just rolled over to the new year. So that would be fiscal year 2019, and unfortunately the system, the way it was built, it says the academic year which starts with the fall 2018 fall semester, so it's a little confusing until you get used to that. But yes, we are in fiscal year 18, and from now on we will entertain changes to the list of core courses for fiscal year 19. And so any changes, so that list is now posted, but it's rolled over from the last year, so it's mainly the same list of courses than last year, but changes can be made. The only thing we ask people to consider is to please make your change before June 30th. We really want to complete our work with the core before the active year starts, and so we need that time. And we always get additional proposals later, and sometimes it's an error or it's people left or things like that, and of course we try to work with everybody, but please have the proposal done by June 30th so we can work it through. Besides rolling the courses over from the last year, we made 3 different changes, or 2 changes, and considered a third. So your group had removed a lot of courses, not a lot, but a sizable number of courses in previous years from the ACGM, and institutions had those listed in the core curriculum. And if they're 2-year institution, it's very easy to see, because there was always a bracket and said funding, I forgot the exact wording, but something like funding removed spring 2016. So there couldn't be any doubt whether it was still a valid course once it was taken out of the ACGM. But going forward, we removed those courses so they don't show up anymore. So it's basically a cleanup, the task we did. Now, 4-year institutions, they link to the ACGM in a special column where they say this course, with whatever rubric and number it may have, is equivalent to this TCCNS course. And we did not remove that, so if 4-year institutions link to outdated ACGM courses, they have to change that themselves. If we work with them and see that, we will notify them and let them know, please adjust your TCCNS number equivalency, but we don't do it for them. Then over the last couple of years, we had, let me backtrack. The core curriculum was implemented in 2014, or for fall 2014. That was the first year. It was a huge workload on everybody, institutions, and Conan Board. There are about 10,000 courses listed. So they were all approved. And it turned out, with experience, we learned we approved courses we shouldn't have, and we didn't at all institutions. And some of them are in the ACGM, but they weren't meant to be general education courses. And those we termed skills development courses, that's a term which comes from SACS. It's a little bit unfortunate because all core courses deal with skills, but it's really courses which deals with skills for the individual. There are a lot of creative arts courses, for example, in that category. So we debated this and we let them sit in the core, and the approval was not uniformly across institutions because we stopped approving them. So those courses we took out as we had announced we would do for academic year 2019, and you actually have a list of those by institution so you can see what is involved. Then there was another group of courses which are similar but not quite the same, and those are the introductory language courses, which also falls into the category that they're not really aligned with the definitions of the core curriculum. Originally, we had told everybody we would take them out too, but we also have been thinking, and UIAC, the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee, who is working with us on these issues, has been thinking. And so it turns out we think we have creative solutions how to deal with these courses in a little bit different way by making rule changes to the core curriculum. That work will take some time because rule changes are involved. So, but we decided at the staff level, we had these sitting there for two years. It doesn't matter if we leave them in for another year to work this out. So we did not remove them from the listing. So if you go to the institution, they're still there. They're still a part of the core for academic year 2019. And during that time that gives us, we will work out this issue hopefully more satisfactorily. By looking mainly at the component area option of the core, but also maybe looking at other issues we have with the core, with upper division courses and so on, how that all fits together and what have we learned from our experience. So in order not to disrupt unduly for the student, we left them in, and it's fairly recent news. And that list of courses is also attached, so you know which institutions are affected. While I say that, we have approved intermediate language courses in the meantime, and we will keep working with that if they fit the definition. We will not allow new introductory courses because we have to work out how we deal with them. That's the information. You have any questions? Yes.
Hi, Reinhold, it's Genevieve. I'd like to introduce maybe a bit of a hot potato of an observation, and then conveniently I have to leave. So
I'll drop it and then you're done.
we were among the universities that submitted letters of appeal concerning the courses that are scheduled to be deleted in FY19. And one of our contentions is that a majority of the courses scheduled for deletion because they're qualified as skills-based courses happen to also be practice-based courses. They're teaching students specific practical skills, application skills. I would encourage UIAC and the coordinating board to consider the appearance of that, and also consider how that could communicate a particular valuation of knowing and doing to a larger audience. We can't further appeal the coordinating board's decision concerning deletion of those particular courses, but I think going forward it makes good sense to look at how practice-based courses are represented in our core curricula. Thank you.
Yeah, so that the issue with all these courses, and they're different courses, and they have all a little bit different issues, but as our Assistant Commissioner, Dr. Peebles, reminds us, the Corps cannot resolve everybody's problem. So the Corps has a very specific purpose, and it should concentrate on that, and actually we hear from the legislator that we should concentrate on that. That said, we realize at the staff level that the Texas Corps is very large, 42 semester credit hours. Other states don't have that large a Corps, and part of the reason is the legislator, who requires us to have 3 extra to make a total of 6 government courses and 3 extra or make a total of 6 semester credit hours history courses. And that is just a fact of life. I mean, that has been since the 30s and the 50s in the statute. So, but then we still have 42 hours because we also have 6 semester credit hour in the component area option. And so without the component area option, it would be 36, which is still 6 hours more than most states. So that's how the math works. Now we realize right now we put the same strings basically with some variation, but that doesn't help really that much on component area option courses than on the rest of the Corps. And so the idea basically is the rest of the Corps, the foundation component area option, have to be general education courses as also to protect you with SACs. And they have to be aligned with the goals of the Corps as defined in the definition. But that may still allow us to work with the component area option, make that more amenable to the other prerogatives of institutions, like those ideas you mentioned, or you talk to any other institution, there are other things they come up with. And so you won't unify that for each institution. So it should be for all the institutions. So I envision, and UIAC sort of envisions that we give more freedom there. How that is being done still has to be worked out. We are planning to have a work group meeting, and then we have UIAC in April, and hopefully we can come up with a concrete idea, and then we have to go to the board with that. But frankly, I'm quite optimistic that we can do something in that. That gives 6 hours, and that still won't resolve all problems in the world. The problems are still there, and the Corps we can't force the Corps to take it all on itself.
Any more questions? All right, well, thank you for the update.
You're welcome.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item 11, discussion of future work and meeting dates. So our next date is April 30th, so hopefully everybody has that on their calendar. One possibility we may want to entertain is having just an afternoon meeting, starting at, say, 12:30, and then, we don't have to take time. I mean, lunch is nice, but it might be more efficient for people's time to just have an afternoon meeting. So that may come up in a poll of some sort to just see how everybody feels about that. This meeting was great. The last meeting we had guests that wished to speak, and so we are working on some protocols, so you may get some questions from Rebecca, or do you want to make some comments now?
Within our division, we have several advisory committees operating, and how they handle business is we're discussing how to make that more consistent and standard, and also to give us clarification about how to proceed here, and certainly vetting of information that is provided to the committee needs to be done, and time-wise, how much time is considered for one issue as opposed to another. So I think I will work with the other individuals who coordinate advisory committees to see if we can come up with some protocols maybe to address those, and then bring it to you to get your feedback as well on how we operate. Most of our things are pretty standardized now or operationalized. We've got a good system, but there's always new issues and new things brought to us that are going to happen, and we're going to need to be proactive in being prepared to handle them in a deliberative type of way. So that was the issue there.
And I have on the list here a reminder about the importance of attendance, though y'all are here, which is much appreciated. That really needs to go out to the people who aren't here. Are there any comments, concerns, anything before we wrap up?
I'd just like to take a quick snapshot of folks. You've heard the idea broached of trying to shift our time, compress. Some meetings, we have a lot of action items and discussion, and it's hard for us to estimate sometimes how long the discussion's going to be. So let's say that we did that. Let's say that we had a meeting scheduled 12:30 to 2:30 or 3. So some of you folks drive and some of you folks fly. And especially for you folks that fly, you don't really get a lot of choices sometimes about when you can fly out of here. So would 3 o'clock, like if we adjourned at 3 o'clock, best you could do is probably get to the airport by 3:30 or 4, depending on traffic. Would that make it much more would that make it more difficult for you to attend meetings, either driving or flying, if the meeting didn't start until 12:30 and then ended, say, about 3 o'clock? Would that present a serious problem for anyone?
James, how much sway do you have with the Southwest Airlines schedule? Oh,
0.
Okay, then that's probably going to be a problem on my
Okay,
end.
so at least for you, flying to pretty much the other end of the state, your options, so is there usually like a latest option and it's early afternoon?
It depends on the day of the week, and so on a Monday, it might be different. On a Tuesday, I can catch an 8:25 out, which is what I'm doing today. I can always get here pretty early in the morning, but if it's, I think, a weekend or a Monday, the latest flight out is around 4 or 5.
Okay.
So
that could make it hard.
I can make it work, whatever group decides.
Okay.
No pressure group.
Okay, well, yeah. It's just helpful to know, to just get a little step and give people a chance just to tell us if this might cause some of a problem. But it sounds like this is something that we could entertain, and maybe we'd consume a little less of your time and still get all the state's business done. So, okay.
Anything else? All right. Before you leave, make sure you complete the travel expense estimate form and just drop it off up here, and safe travels home. Thank you. We're adjourned. It's 1:08.